Look, certainly the Prime Minister has been very keen to walk away from it. I mean, the trajectory of China-Australia relations seems to have been quite positive. It looks as though the strategy of economic coercion hasn't worked, so they're trying something different. And I suppose it will come down to what this delegation does. I mean, there's Barnaby Joyce in there, so whether
Anything could
he's
happen.
look, anything could happen once you let him loose overseas and flying with some booze. Who knows what could happen? But look, I think they've got fingers crossed that nothing much is said. So far, the foreign ministry in China hasn't blown up about this, so they'll be happy about that.
Indeed. What is troubling them a little bit is this new COVID wave, the protests that happened last week. They are now moving to ease COVID restrictions. There's a little bit of confusion as to exactly how much. Is this going to be enough to calm the dissent that we saw last week?
Yeah, certainly those who went out of the streets are very happy about this, and in some ways they see it as vindication of them doing so. So whether the success of this emboldens them to protest about a lot of other grievances in their life will be interesting to see. But I mean, it's kind of bonkers. China's had 3 years to get ready for reopening, and the rates of vaccination amongst the elderly are still ridiculously low. I mean, it's 20% for people over the age of 80 have had 2 shots and a booster. So they're so far behind. They could face another backlash if the bodies start mounting up.
Yes, and indeed, the US intelligence has reported that, in fact, President Xi is stubbornly refusing to accept Western vaccines that could potentially prevent millions from dying if they do lift these restrictions. This is a big risk for him.
It's a massive risk. I mean, the Germans have been offering vaccines to them for a long time now. They're said to be developing their own mRNA vaccine. But the ones that they're using at the moment are considerably less effective. They're just very old-fashioned, inactivated forms of the virus, just like a regular vaccine. So the rates of protection are far lower.
Yeah. You know, Graeme, I guess there was this contract with the Chinese people that this regime has made that will provide you stability and affluence and, moving out of poverty and stability to a degree. But this is not what they are currently delivering. How much of a risk is that for the president?
Yeah, look, absolutely. He's facing a low-growth future. And what tends to happen in this scenario is you go for nationalism. And that's fine if you can get everyone singing on the same page. But clearly there's a lot of people who aren't singing from the same page. And some of the most intriguing things from the protest is saying, we're meant to be manipulated by foreign forces. What foreign forces are you talking about? I mean, for goodness sake, the internet's censored. How on earth can we even meet these foreign forces to be influenced by them? So there's a lot of discontent that he will struggle to channel.
Yeah. Let's talk to a little bit about Jiang Zemin's funeral, which is going to be held this week. You are something of a scholar of Jiang. It is a fascinating time for him to have died. In terms of the China that he represented, paint us a picture what he did do, even though there was so little expectation that he would be a great president.
Yeah, certainly. I suppose, at least from him. I mean, he was very, thrust into the role. I don't think he ever planned to become the General Secretary of China. But Tiananmen happened and they needed someone to fill the chair, and he was it. He was incredibly insecure about his position. He even asked an aide, how deep are the waters of Zhongnanhai, which is the government compound. And the one time I actually met him, there was this incredible theatre where his teacup was changed 3 times, and then he came out with his own teacup because he was so paranoid about being poisoned. But at the time, he was sort of this slightly comical figure. He was very flamboyant. He would dance with Jacques Chirac's wife. He would sing opera. He was very unlike the drab Chinese leaders before him, and certainly what we've seen after. And what he did with China was really significant. He changed the nature of the party. He admitted capitalists into the party and oversaw pretty well the marketization of China's economy, this extraordinary legacy that some of which Xi Jinping is trying to undo, but some of it can't be undone.
Indeed. And, I mean, he presided probably over the greatest growth, but he was also, you know, when you talk about the nationalism and the sort of what Xi seems to want to do to make all Chinese exactly the same, to sort of get rid of any diversity, he championed that diversity.
Yeah, this is one of the things that at the time we sort of found it unremarkable, and no one would imagine. I mean, the pendulum's really swung. No one would imagine that you'd be mourning the departure of this man's regime. But, you know, he celebrated and promoted local languages. It was a very much more open China than it is today. You go into bookshops and find anything you like. These days, they're closing down the number of statistical things you can get your hands on. They were booming under Jiang Zemin. You know, you wanted any figure, you could go and get a book on it. It was a very different China, much more open.
Yeah, indeed. He had many fans online. He had the famous nickname, but his fans are coming in for some censorship at this point in time, because I guess they don't want him to be glorified at a time when Xi Jinping is trying to manage this rather delicate situation, it would seem.
Yes, I mean, they call themselves toad fans, or has in Chinese. And, you know, apart from his sort of slightly ranine appearance, it's a way of talking about him without talking about him in some ways. You know, rather than using his name, you talk about the toad, and there's many words for toad in Chinese, so you can have your discussions without being cracked down on immediately. But yeah, he's not going to bring people out onto the streets. I mean, people aren't going to throw themselves under tanks in the name of irony. But there's real affection for him and his time. You know, when you had a Chinese leader that would show emotion in public, I mean, this is so unthinkable that, you know, even this thing in Hong Kong where he berated the journalists for being too young, too naive, a great internet meme. You just can't imagine Xi Jinping losing his cool in public.
No. Do you think he would be saddened at the direction China is going now?
Look, he was a loyal party guy. So, you know, at base, he wasn't a great reformer by any means. He wanted the party to survive. And so I think as a loyal party member, he would be happy that it was, you know, still there 20 years on. And it was by no means certain back then. I mean, all this coming collapse of China, it really started in the late days of Jiang Zemin, when it kind of had this sort of end of regime feel. You know, he was meant to be getting into spirituality. All the leaders were surrounded by these Qigong masters, and they had this battle with Falun Gong, sort of for the spirit of the nation. So yeah, it's hard to you know, imagine that it would end like this.
Indeed. Great to get your reflections, Graeme. Thanks so much.
Thank you.